They say nothing hurts like family, but nothing prepares you for the moment your own father screams across the dinner table. You and your kid are just freeloaders, all while he's living in the house you paid for. My mom didn't defend me. She just smiled like she'd waited years to see me put in my place. My 12-year-old son sat upstairs too scared to join us, probably hearing every word. I stared at my parents, their plates piled high with food from my kitchen, and I realized I'd finally run out of room to keep swallowing their betrayal. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I looked my father dead in the eye and said, "You have 24 hours to leave." The room went silent. My hands were steady, but inside I was done being the family's last resort, done paying for their mistakes, done pretending blood alone made us family. That night, everything changed. If you've ever had to choose between your own peace and the people who should have protected you, you'll understand why. But before I share my story with you, I'd love to know you're here with me. Drop a simple hi in the comments so I know you're listening, or let me know where you're watching from. I love to see how far my story can reach. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. If this story means something to you, or you've ever felt invisible in your own family, don't forget to subscribe. It helps more people hear these stories, and it means the world to me. My name is Cove Wilder, and this is the story of how I chose my own freedom. It started with a call I never wanted to answer. The office was a glass box high above downtown Austin, all filtered sunlight and the low drone of AC screens reflecting the city's skyline. Sprint review ran late. I was already mentally out the door when my phone lit up with Mom. There's a part of me that still expects some gentle check-in even now, but her voice was already on the edge, tight, wobbly, rehearsed in the way only my mother could manage. She launched straight into it. "Your father needs heart surgery, Cove. They said he could die if he doesn't get it. The house, well, it's not good. We're $300,000 behind and the bank is threatening foreclosure." Her voice dropped almost a whisper. "Can you help?" I caught my own reflection in the window, 30, supposedly successful, and I still felt 15. I told her to come for dinner tomorrow. Bring Dad. Bring Knox. Let's talk, all of us. I set the phone down and exhaled, feeling the old knot in my stomach tighten. The office emptied around me. I texted Asher, my son, my anchor, that I'd be home late and to finish his science homework before Harper brought over dinner. Then I headed for 6th Street to the coffee shop where Tessa and I always met when life felt like a test. She was already at our spot, spinning a pencil between her fingers, eyes sharp above a steaming espresso. I laid it all out: the surgery, the debt, the foreclosure, the fact that I didn't trust any of it. They want money, but no numbers, no paperwork, just help. Tessa didn't flinch. "Ground rules," she said. "No handouts, no cash. Get the statements, the hospital bills, the letter from the bank. Hell, record the conversation. Texas is a one-party state. If this goes south, you need protection." She smiled, but it wasn't comfort. "They can't guilt you into giving away your future. Not again." By the time I got home, Asher was at the table, bent over a spiral notebook, eyes darting between textbook diagrams of Mars and the clock on the microwave. I ruffled his hair, tried to hide the tension in my voice, and told him tomorrow night was a grown-up dinner and he'd be with Harper. "No arguments, Ash. Promise." He rolled his eyes but nodded, used to these last-minute plans. Upstairs, I drafted an email to Marin, my real estate lawyer, subject: possible REO short sale inquiry, just in case I needed to move fast. There was a kind of safety and preparation in turning emotion into logistics. In the kitchen, I set out 4 plates, knives, aligned napkins folded tight, the surface immaculate except for a small sticky note I slid under the edge of the table. 1. Documentation. 2. No attacks on my kid. 3. No cash. 4. I end the meeting if needed. A talisman, my line in the sand. When the house was quiet, I pulled my wallet from the drawer and found the letter from UT Austin I'd carried since I was 18. The paper was soft, now edges worn. My name acceptance full of hope I barely recognized anymore. I pressed my thumb to the signature, thinking about all the ways family can take your dreams and shape them into something sharp. This time I promised myself I'd control the story. This time no one would make me the villain for protecting what I love. Sometimes a single summer can take everything you think you know about family and burn it to the ground. I was 18. We lived in a one-story clapboard house on the east side of Austin, the front porch groaning under the weight of too many seasons, the pecan tree in the yard offering more shade than comfort. The living room always smelled like dust and cinnamon. That afternoon, sunlight came in at a harsh angle, illuminating my father in his threadbare armchair, a man with a plan for everyone but himself. My mother hovered by the window, gaze fixed anywhere but on me. There was an envelope on the table, my grandfather's will, or what was left of it. My acceptance letter to UT was fresh in my hand, heart pounding with the hope of finally starting a life I'd chosen for myself. I was supposed to use the $100,000 Grandpa left me for tuition, a dorm room, the chance to be something more than just another Wilder stuck in a cycle of almosts. Instead, they called a family meeting. Dad explained, "It's a once-in-a-lifetime shot, Cove. VR startups are booming. We can invest your money, but for all of us." Mom's voice was soft but immovable. "Knox has vision, Cove. He'll make it work. You can always take out loans for college. We'll pay you back." I remember the shape of my own words, hesitation, disbelief, pleading. What about my future? What if it fails? Dad barely looked up. "Sometimes you have to put family first. That's how we survive." I didn't win. No one was ever on my side when Knox was in the picture. In the end, I signed a handwritten IOU, no terms, no protection, just a promise that meant nothing once the money left my account. Within a year, the startup was dead. There were no repayments, no apologies, no more talk about college. By then, I was working nights at a coffee shop, sleeping on a friend's floor, every voicemail from home left unanswered. The last time I stood on that porch, the boards creaked under my feet, the pecan tree branches heavy with the kind of regret only family can plant. I carried all of that into adulthood, the shame, the anger, the promise I made myself never to let anyone use my loyalty as a bargaining chip again. I got a job. I found an apartment. I built a life brick by brick while they pretended not to see. I became the practical one, the fallback plan, the person everyone called when things went bad, but never when they went right. Knox was the visionary, the golden child, the hero in every story they told at Thanksgiving. I was the footnote, the utility player, the scapegoat for every bad bet and every heartbreak. And I accepted it for longer than I care to admit. Years later, sorting through old Gmail threads to clean up my contacts before Asher started school, I stumbled onto something I'd never seen, a chain of messages between my parents and Grandpa's estate lawyer. Turns out the money never came straight to me. It went into a holding account for Cove's education under my parents' control, not mine. The lawyer asked for receipts. Mom replied that Cove's future is in tech, he'll help the family someday. It wasn't a crime, not exactly, but it was a betrayal, a twisting of Grandpa's intentions, and suddenly everything made a sharper kind of sense. So now, with my own son upstairs, his dreams still his own, I stare at the letter from UT Austin, the old IOU, the musty scent of pecan wood I'll never shake, and I draw my boundaries a little tighter. I know the paperwork is out there, evidence that I was never truly given a choice. And I know this time I will not let history repeat itself. This time, if my family wants help, they'll have to meet me on my terms or not at all. Building a new life isn't just about work, it's about surviving your own family's shadow. I started in a studio not far from the UT campus, mattress on the floor, ramen in the pantry, my calendar crammed with shifts and assignments. There were nights the only thing keeping me awake was the distant hum of the South Congress Strip, the hiss of the espresso machine during my midnight shifts, and the feeling that I was a ghost moving between other people's dreams. My mornings began with sticky tables and stale pastries. I stacked books on code and algorithms next to order pads, turning my head from the voice that sometimes told me it was pointless. But I kept going. It was the only way out. I graduated top of my class, earned a spot at a tech firm that believed more in big bets than bloodlines. I dove in. Coffee runs and product launches. 1 year became 2, then 5. I met Finn at a late-night hackathon, all wit and bright eyes, and for a while I thought building something together meant I'd finally have a home that wasn't borrowed or conditional. We married quickly, bought cheap wedding bands, and celebrated with friends over takeout tacos in our first place, a cramped walk-up with a window just big enough to watch thunderstorms roll in over Zilker Park. Then came Asher. I remember holding him in the hospital, swaddled and small, his grip on my finger stronger than any vow I'd ever made. It was the first time in my life I wanted to promise someone the world and mean it. But families are not fairy tales. 3 years in Finn's phone buzzed too often, the late nights stopped being about work, and I found the messages no one wants to see. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He only asked for forgiveness. I gave him my silence instead. Our split was quick paperwork, smooth, and we set the rules: he would pay support, see Asher on school breaks, no fighting in front of our son. I packed up every trace of our marriage except Asher's baby photos and put it in a storage box at the back of my new closet. Tessa was there for all of it. She had a way of making logic sound like love spreadsheets, like safe harbors. "You're the product now," she said once, grinning as she helped me draw up a 5-year plan, down payment for a house, college fund for Asher, boundaries nobody could cross. She found us a 3-bedroom in West Austin, big enough for books and Legos and sleepovers, the kind of place with a pool out back where the afternoon light scattered across the kitchen floor and everything felt possible. On our first night there, Asher and I made tacos, his favorite, with too much cheese and not enough lettuce, and ate on the patio while the city buzzed around us. It became our ritual taco night for just us two, a small sanctuary against whatever storms were brewing. But storms always circle back. By the time Asher was old enough to ask why his grandparents never visited, the calls started again. First it was $2,000 for a missed utility bill, then $5 for car repairs, then $10 for another opportunity of Knox as a down payment on an augmented reality startup that sounded as vague as everyone before. I wired the money a few times, always with the same speech about this being the last, but it never was. Each voicemail was a new request wrapped in nostalgia, an echo of childhood. "We sacrificed for you, Cove. Can't you help out?" The guilt wore me thin. I stopped answering, started saving the messages in a folder labeled Boundaries. Tessa noticed the weight in my eyes before anyone else. "You can't bleed for people who'd let you drain out," she warned. "Family doesn't mean access. It means respect." I listened. I wrote up a new set of rules: no money without a contract, no favors without paper. And Asher would never be in the room when those conversations happened. I kept every request to email, every reply short, every boundary clear. The more I built, the more I realized what I had to lose. Taco nights and Lego towers. College fund statements tucked behind the coffee filters. Asher's bedroom, all model rockets, Mars posters, and a telescope pointed at the sky. I hid the only photo of Dad and me out on the old lawn, me grinning him mid-throw deep in a drawer, the glass cold against my palm when I needed to remember why I couldn't go back. I owed it to my son to protect what I'd clawed together. I owed it to myself to never be collateral again. Then Tessa called one night, voice urgent. She'd been double-checking my parents' credit, prepping for whatever emergency might be next, and found something that made my stomach drop. The $300,000 they owed wasn't just for medical bills or a failing house. 2 years ago, they'd taken out a cash-out refinance, leveraging the only thing left, the house in East Austin, to funnel more money into one of Knox's new ventures. My mother's story about saving Dad's life was only half the truth. The rest was just another bet, another roll of the dice with someone else's future as the stake. I felt the old anger rise sharp and cold. I realized if they could gamble everything again, knowing what it cost me last time, there was no guarantee they wouldn't pull Asher or me into their next crisis. I stared at the emails, the numbers, the lies. If tomorrow's dinner turned into another performance, another guilt trip, I needed more than resolve. I needed proof. I needed a way out that didn't leave me and Asher bleeding in the street. The night of the dinner, I set the table with a surgeon's precision: 4 plates, 4 sets of cutlery, water glasses sparkling under the pendant lights, each napkin folded square and tight. I glanced through the glass doors at the pool surface, still as a secret. Asher was next door with Harper, my instructions clear: stay out until I called, no matter what. I checked the time, heartbeat ticking with each minute closer to the confrontation. They arrived all at once, like actors called to set. Lila swept in first, arms full of homemade barbecue, her smile too wide, voice too sweet. Calvin shuffled behind, looking smaller than I remembered, but the steel in his eyes was familiar. Knox arrived late, keys jangling, cell phone glued to his hand, humming with restless energy, and the hint of a new deal on his lips. We sat the room heavy with everything left unsaid. Lila tried to start with nostalgia, remembering birthdays. Old neighbors, her potato salad recipe, but the air never softened. I let her talk, then asked for the paperwork. The bills, the bank letters, proof of the surgery, anything to make their request real. She faltered. Calvin shrugged, eyes darting. There was nothing, just their word and a familiar plea for trust. Knox picked up where she left off, pitching his new project with all the swagger of someone who's never had to clean up his own mess. It's going to change the world, Cove. Just need a little help to get it off the ground. You're in tech, you get it. I didn't answer. The silence sharpened the tension until Calvin couldn't hold it anymore. You make $350 a year, Cove. How can you sit there and watch your family drown? His voice cracked, the old command gone, but the expectation still thick. Lila added, your son's a Wilder too. Don't you want him to have family, to know where he comes from? I felt my hands steady against the wood. I told them about the money at 18. The promise, the IOU. No one honored the dream I'd buried to keep their hope alive. I said no. I would not pay the debt. I would not mortgage my son's future to cover their mistakes. I'd already paid more than my share. I told them calmly, clearly, that they had 24 hours to leave my house. The words hung between us, bright and final. Knox's face twisted in disbelief. You're playing the victim now. You got lucky, that's all. Some of us have vision, some just get by. He was louder now, voice rising with each sentence. Lila's mask slipped, her eyes hard and bright. After everything we did for you, you'd throw us out. How can you be so cold? Calvin slammed his palm on the table, silverware rattling, eyes blazing with the shame of a man whose power was finally gone. Inside, I was shaking, but I held the line. I looked at the empty chair where Asher would have sat, a reminder of why I couldn't bend. I let their anger wash over me, let every accusation land without defense. For years, I'd carried their disappointment like a badge, but tonight I set it down. I watched as Knox, frustrated, blurted out that he was the one who had signed for most of the debt, that Mom and Dad just backed him up. He said it fast, not realizing what he'd given away, and I saw Lila's face pale. Then, as if rehearsed, Lila began to cry, voice high and trembling. She threatened to put everything online to tell their version of the story so the world would see me as the heartless son. Do you want your co-workers, your neighbors, Asher's friends to know what you've done? Do you want to be the reason this family falls apart? She implied she'd bring Asher into it, make him the center of a story he'd never chosen. That was the final line. I told them again, 24 hours. After that, I would do what I had to do to protect my son and the life I'd built. The dinner ended in silence. They gathered their things, mouths tight, eyes glassy. I cleared the plates, washed the dishes, and watched the clock count down the hours to my own freedom. In the quiet, I felt the old shame press and the fear that I was ungrateful, unloving, everything they accused me of. But when I looked at Asher's empty seat, I remembered who I was fighting for, and I knew I'd made the right choice. The house felt both emptier and more like home than it ever had before. The fallout didn't wait. The next morning at the office, before my second coffee had even cooled, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. A coworker glanced over, awkward and curious, as I scrolled through the notifications. There was my mother, Lila, full theater mode, sobbing into her phone for TikTok. In the video, she cried about her son, the successful tech manager who had abandoned his parents in their hour of need. She even flashed photos of me with Asher, the two of us smiling in front of our West Austin house, as proof that I'd chosen money over blood. The hashtags were as brutal as the comments. Ungrateful son, nah family traitor, ma sa heartless. It was spreading fast. I watched the view count spiral up, 10,000, 50, 100,000, and climbing. It wasn't just her followers anymore. My name was out there, painted in colors I never chose. The group chats at Asher's school exploded. Other parents, people I barely knew, were suddenly experts on my family. Milo, Asher's basketball coach, sent a well-meaning but loaded text. If there's anything I can do, let me know. Asher's a good kid. Then came the email from the principal. We've become aware of some social media attention involving your family. Please let us know if Asher needs support. I felt the walls closing in. I was angry, furious at Lila for dragging Asher into her drama, terrified that my son would be the one paying the price for all our failures. I watched the video again in the break room, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. Lila's tears looked real enough, but I recognized the performance. She twisted every fact, made my refusal to pay her debts sound like a cold-blooded betrayal. She hinted at Finn, my ex, and our divorce, letting viewers fill in the blanks with whatever version made me look worst. She called Asher a boy without a proper family. My hands shook as I closed the app. Tessa didn't waste a second. She pulled me into the corner booth at our regular cafe, laptop open, voice low. Save everything. Screenshots, links, timestamps. This isn't just family drama, it's defamation. She showed me how to lock down my accounts, report the video, and start a file for Marin, my lawyer. They want a war on your reputation. Give them paperwork instead. Tessa's practical calm helped, but I could feel the heat of everyone else's stares. The whole city seemed to be watching, waiting for me to crack. That night I got a text from Lila. You made me do this. I'll keep going if you don't help. Maybe people need to know about Finn, about your precious job, about everything. She wanted a confession, a surrender, anything to prove I was still under her control. I didn't respond. I called Asher into the kitchen, sat him down, and explained that some people would say things about our family online that weren't true, but that he was safe and loved no matter what he heard at school. He nodded, a little older in that moment than any 12-year-old should be. At the office, colleagues started to whisper. Some offered fake sympathy, others avoided eye contact. My manager called me in, asked if everything was all right at home, if there was anything they should know. I lied and said everything was under control. Meanwhile, the TikTok kept spreading, 500,000 views by evening comment sections packed with strangers debating my worth as a son and a father. A few anonymous accounts began tagging me, claiming to have receipts about my childhood, my divorce, my supposed selfishness. The narrative spun out of my hands. Later that week, Tessa called with new intel. Check Knox's socials. Sure enough, my brother had started his own campaign videos where he played the wronged visionary, hinting that I'd always sabotaged his big ideas, that the family debt was my fault for not investing in our future. I felt sick watching it, but it confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't just about money or even pride. It was about control. They would burn the house down before admitting they'd lost their grip on me. Then Marin called, voice steady, the kind of calm that only comes from having a plan. There's a provision in the mortgage from 2 years ago, she said. If the note is in default, the bank can sell to any qualified buyer, regardless of the other owner's consent. You have the means, Cove. If you want that house out of their hands, now's your chance. I sat at my desk, scrolling through angry emails and cruel DMs, and felt something shift. For the first time in weeks, I had an option, a way to end this on my terms. I started pulling financials, calling banks, letting my anger fuel me. My family wanted a war. I would fight it with paperwork, not pain. The next days blurred into a rhythm of legal strategy and self-preservation. I met Tessa at the cafe again, the table littered with files and her color-coded notes. You need to move fast. Buy the house before they do something desperate. Marin's drafting the paperwork. I'll handle the calls. I nodded, grateful, exhausted, angry. I called Asher between meetings, checked in about school, reminded him to ignore the noise online. You're not responsible for any of this, Ash. Don't read the comments. Don't answer any questions about family. He promised, and I trusted him. He was braver than I ever was at that age. At Marin's office, the paperwork stacked up. She explained every line, every clause. The bank, eager to offload a defaulted mortgage, was more than willing to work with me. Once it's yours, Marin said, you have every right to set the terms. They can't claim victimhood if you own the deed. I felt relief and guilt in equal measure. Taking the house felt like winning and losing at the same time. But I had to do it for Asher and myself. The sale went through quickly. Marin sent formal notices to Lila, Calvin, and Knox. They had 24 hours to vacate or face legal consequences. She also sent a cease and desist to Lila over the TikTok, citing defamation and invasion of privacy. Knox responded first, furious, calling me a traitor in public and private. Calvin tried to negotiate, offering partial payments, but I held firm, no more bailouts, no more guilt. Lila's response was another round of online tears videos begging strangers to help two parents thrown out by their heartless son. I watched them all detached now, the emotional sting dulled by the sheer volume of the noise. I hired a cleaning crew for the old house, changed the locks, prepared to list it for rent. The sense of control was intoxicating but also lonely. I wondered if Asher would understand someday, if he'd see that sometimes protecting your family means drawing the hardest line. One afternoon, while the crew was clearing out the attic, they found an old cardboard box buried beneath piles of Christmas ornaments and broken tools. Inside were papers yellowed with age, my grandfather's original will bank statements, a handwritten letter addressed to me. The will made it explicit the money left for my education was never meant to pass through my parents, never meant to fund anyone's dream, but mine. The IOU from all those years ago was there too, a reminder that my loss hadn't just been emotional. I added the documents to Marin's growing file, proof that my story was more than just a son turning away from his family. While I managed logistics, the drama online kept burning. Knox pushed Lila to escalate, make public accusations against me, but Calvin, who had been mostly silent, finally stepped back. He left the group chat, blocked both of them, and stopped responding to their calls. For once, I didn't feel triumphant. Just tired. Finn, my ex, surprised me with an email. He wrote, "If you need me to testify about what your parents did coming to me for money, the things they said about you, I'll do it. You deserve the truth to be out there." I thanked him, unsure if I'd ever need to use that card. With 24 hours left on the eviction notice, Lila sent me one last email. For the first time, she admitted she'd made mistakes. She blamed Knox for leading her astray, for using her as cover for his failures. She asked if I could forgive, if I could find it in myself to save what's left of our family. I read her words, my heart heavy but resolute. I looked around my new home, at Asher's science project on the table, at the photos of us on the fridge, at the blue Texas sky beyond the windows. I realized I had everything I needed and nothing I was willing to give up for the sake of old wounds. I was no longer the son who owed anyone my silence, my money, or my forgiveness. The law was on my side, and for the first time in my life, so was my own sense of worth. As the deadline passed, I braced for whatever came next, ready to defend my new family, my boundaries, and the peace I'd fought so hard to win. 48 hours after I bought the house and drew my final boundary, the old world and the new overlapped in ways I never could have predicted. The house in East Austin was stripped of its comfort, now emptied of all but boxes and the clutter of regret. The team I'd hired worked their way through the rooms, packing the leftover scraps of my childhood into crates, sweeping out the last of my father's old records, my mother's collection of greeting cards, Knox's failed tech gadgets. It felt less like clearing out a home and more like unthreading a tapestry that had never really kept us warm. I received Lila's email that morning, long, tangled, begging, and bitter all at once. She blamed Knox, pleaded with me to reconsider, reminded me of birthdays and the years she'd held our family together. But it ended with a list of everything she felt I owed her, and an apology that wasn't really an apology. If you could just save us one more time, she wrote, we could start over. My hands shook with a mix of anger and sadness, and yet all I felt was emptiness. While the team worked, someone found a battered folder beneath a pile of bank statements and unopened letters. Inside was my grandfather's original will, the one that said so clearly the money was meant for my education, not a family venture, not a last-minute loan for Knox, not another bet on hope. There were letters from the bank too, all proof that every step I'd taken to protect myself, to shield Asher, was justified. I handed the documents to Marin, knowing this was the final piece I needed to lay the old ghosts to rest. I spent the next hours between the house and my own mind, running between legal forms and everyday life. I called Finn, met him at a neutral cafe, and made sure we were united about keeping Asher out of the fallout. Finn agreed to testify if it came to that, and promised to keep our son's name out of any more gossip. It was the first real act of peace in months. When I came home, Asher was on the couch, focused on a drawing of a rocket ship heading to Mars. I watched him for a long moment, feeling both lighter and older. Lila and Knox returned to the house late in the day to collect their things. There was no argument, no emotional last stand. Lila barely met my eyes. Knox loaded boxes into a rented van, his face a mask of frustration and exhaustion. Calvin never showed up. He had walked out of the family group chat the night before, and I didn't hear from him again. The final act of this chapter was wordless. The family I'd spent so long trying to save no longer wanted saving. After they left, Marin sent an official confirmation. The case with the school was closed. Asher's name cleared, no long-term harm done. The message brought relief I didn't know I still needed. I went up to Asher's room, found him asleep with his head on a book, the rocket drawing tucked under his pillow. For the first time in weeks, I let myself cry. But endings never stay neat. That night, Lila posted one last video, this time not to attack me, but to publicly turn on Knox. She apologized for dragging me through the mud, admitted she'd made mistakes, and asked her followers to reconsider who was really to blame. The comment section turned into a battlefield. People arguing, blaming, dissecting every family detail she'd ever shared. I watched the numbers climb, watched my family's private collapse turn into public spectacle, and realized how little I cared for anyone's opinion outside my own four walls. Tessa called her tone cautious but hopeful. "An independent journalist wants to hear your side," she said. "Not for clickbait. For the people out there going through the same thing." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to let it all go, move on quietly. Another part knew there was power in truth, and that maybe sharing mine would help someone else draw their own line. Finn, ever the wild card, sent a late-night message. "If you and Asher need a break, come stay with us in California for a while. The ocean's good for clearing your head." I laughed for the first time in ages. I told him I'd think about it. At the end of the day, I sat on my own back porch, the Texas sun dipping below the trees, and wondered what it meant to finally be free. I'd won the fight, but at the price of severing the last threads that connected me to my blood family. Asher slept soundly upstairs, a testament to everything I was fighting for. The world outside could gossip and judge, but inside these walls we were building something new, a life not built on obligation but on choice. I faced the hardest question. Would I keep the door to my old life open, even a crack, or close it forever? Could I forgive? Or was it enough to finally forgive myself? Was telling my story about healing or just reopening old wounds? I didn't have an answer yet, but for once the silence felt like peace. Life found a gentle rhythm again, the chaos fading as Asher and I settled into our own rituals. West Austin became our haven. We cooked taco night every Friday, extra cheese melting into laughter movie marathons under blankets in the living room. The old tension that haunted every family meal was gone. Now it was just the two of us inventing new traditions and letting the scars fade. On weekends, we dug a small patch in the backyard and planted a pecan tree together, our hands dirty, our spirits lighter. Asher wanted to check it every morning, convinced it would sprout overnight. I told him trees and trust both take time to grow. There was satisfaction in building something from scratch and rooting ourselves where we chose to stand. One afternoon, I took Asher to a space exhibit at UT, watched his face light up as he learned about Mars missions and telescopes big enough to see the edges of galaxies. He ran ahead, rattling off facts to anyone who would listen. I hung back, letting his excitement wash over me, thinking, this is what home feels like. Not a place, but a presence, a promise to show up again and again for the people who matter. Driving home, I passed the old house in East Austin. Children were playing basketball on the front lawn, their laughter echoing in the twilight. The porch was freshly painted, the pecan tree casting new shade. I felt no ache, no anger, just closure. The house was no longer mine in any sense that mattered. I cut all remaining ties to Lila Calvin and Knox. I blocked their numbers, erased them from my social feeds, kept a single email address open only for emergencies. I owed them nothing, not anymore. My energy turned instead toward Asher, Tessa, and the people who'd proven themselves with actions, not words. Tessa and I drew up a new plan, investing in Asher's future, giving back to Austin through community projects, creating the kind of legacy I'd once thought only blood could claim. When the journalist called, I said yes. I told the whole story not for revenge, but to show others they weren't alone. That choosing freedom was possible, even if it meant walking away from those who'd taught you the meaning of love and loss. The interview was raw, honest, and when it was published, messages poured in from strangers who saw themselves in my words. It was healing in a way I hadn't expected.